Good evening, everyone. We are now in Second Kings chapter 20. We are continuing on from verse 12. We have spent some time on the first 11 verses when we discovered how Hezekiah fell very ill before, right around the time where Sennacherib was about to attack Jerusalem. And in his terminal illness, he pleaded with God that he wants to continue to do what he needs to do. And in that pleading to continue to help lead the country, God listened to him and sent Isaiah to tell him that God will add 15 years to his life. And we have discussed that the last time. It was that would have been the original length of years for Hezekiah, because Isaiah would then provide a potion to actually heal his boil, that he will not die. But he wasn't so sure that he was actually getting his life prolonged, and then he asked for a sign. And so Isaiah asked him, would you like to see the sundial move forward as a shadow by 10 steps, or move behind by 10 steps? And obviously, moving behind by 10 steps would essentially lengthen his life symbolically. And that was essentially what happened. Now, when we come to verse 12, please bear in mind verse 12 is another period of time. It is not a continuation. The first 11 verses speaks about a time right around where Sennacherib was attacking Judah, and before the fateful end of the Assyrian army. And so you find that Hezekiah had two very crucial engagements: one, facing death of his illness, and two, facing certainty of death with the attack of Sennacherib. Now, that would have gone on already. He wouldn't have died. His boil was healed, and Sennacherib's army was destroyed, and Sennacherib went back home to Assyria. So verse 12 basically says, at that time. It it merely means at a time by itself. This narrative is a narrative by itself, and we read this narrative as one that is after chapter 19, after the destruction by the angel of Jehovah, literally overnight. 135,000 strong of the army had been demolished, and the rest, including the king, went back home. It is after that period. Here we are told we have uh, Berodach, Berodach Bal Adan, Berodach Bal Adan, a son of Bal Adan, and Bal Adan at this point in time is the king of Babylon. Notice this is not Nebuchadnezzar and or Nebuchadnezzar. It's before that. And then he had sent letters and a gift to Hezekiah or Hitzkiyahu, because he heard that Hezekiah had been sick. Now, please bear in mind that by itself, we may think that he was there when Hezekiah was sick, but that is not the case. This word here was that he was sick, right? He was. But he's no longer sick, so he has recovered. And this is an interest of the king of Babylon. Please understand that Assyria is quite far away north. Babylon is an emerging kingdom. At this point in time, Assyria is the mega kingdom. Now, of course, Egypt is another one. And the emerging kingdom would be the east of Assyria, that would be Babylon. And they are growing up to be a pretty formidable nation and a kingdom. Now, this is a description of a parallel in Isaiah chapter 39. Let's take a look at Isaiah chapter 39, and then we'll come back to 2 Kings chapter 20. Isaiah chapter 39 would be a parallel passage, and that would have been written by Isaiah from his perspective of exactly what actually transpired at this time from verse 12. And we will come back to 2 Kings chapter 20, verse 12, after we examine Isaiah chapter 39. In Isaiah chapter 39, it begins this way. It says, at that time, and obviously we find that these are all the similar statements. At that time, Merodach Baladan, the son of Baladan, king of Babylon, sent letters and a gift to Hezekiah, for he heard that he had been sick. And then we read this, and then had recovered. So this idea of had been sick or was sick and had recovered would give us an idea of an A and a B. Was means in the past, had recovered, expressed that he has since recovered and that he didn't die. All right. And then we read in verse 2 all the way to verse 8, there is a little bit of the ideas that were written in chapter 20 and in verse 13 onwards. So let's focus on Isaiah chapter 39 and in verse 2. Hezekiah was pleased. The idea of pleased here means that he was very happy, very glad. He was rejoicing that the king of Babylon actually came to see him. And then, so all of these would be the and thens, right? Hezekiah let them see his treasure house, the silver, the gold, the balsam oil, the excellent olive oil, his entire armory, and everything that was found in his treasuries. There was nothing in his house nor in all his realm that Hezekiah did not let them see. Now, please understand that in the Hebrew words, the idea of see, this word here, see, is not merely casually looking at things or having glimpses. That we should understand that this is a very important word, really to gaze intently. To inspect is also another good word, not just seeing, it's to look carefully. And this is a problem because at this point in time, Babylon is not seen as an enemy yet, but eventually will. The enemy today is Assyria. Sennacherib is the enemy. And so perhaps there could be a situation where Hezekiah might be thinking, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And since Babylon is the enemy of Assyria, it might be good to make friends with the king of Babylon. Now, that would be a way of looking at things. We continue in verse 3. And then Isaiah the prophet came to Hezekiah and said to him, "What did these men say? And from where did they come to you?" And then Hezekiah said, "They came to me from a far country, from Babylon, very far away." We're talking about almost a thousand miles, really, all the way to present day Iraq. Quite a distance, quite a distance. Verse 4, and then he said, Isaiah said, "What have they seen in your house?" And then in verse 4, it is also a and then here. So, and then Hezekiah answered, "They have seen everything that is in my house. There's nothing among my treasuries that I have not let them see." Remember, it is not casually walking around, but inspecting. What have they looked at? In verse 5, also missing this word, and then Isaiah said to Hezekiah, "Hear the word of Jehovah Tzevaot." Whenever we read this name or title of God, Jehovah Tzevaot, Jehovah Tzevaot really speaks about God going to war, being the commander in chief of his army. And by context, we can see his army would be the hosts of the heavenly hosts, meaning all the angels. It could be the Israelites when he came out of Egypt. They are also called the armies of God. And so, as long as God is a commander of the army, then his title, Jehovah Tzevaot, will apply. It says, "Behold, the days are coming." Now, every time you see these words, the days are coming, these are prophetic words. When everything that is in your house and what your fathers have stored up to this day will be carried to Babylon, nothing will be left, says Jehovah. And some of your sons who will come from you, whom you will father, will be taken away, and they will become eunuchs in the palace of the king of Babylon. So the word here, eunuch, sarisim or saris, carries both meanings. It carries the meaning of officers, as well as it carries the meaning of a eunuch. And in the ancient times, when the king has many wives and concubines, and particularly in an eastern setting, many of the officers that the king would trust to be in the palace usually are castrated, and hence the word eunuch, but also carries the title of officers. And you find that maybe, I'm just saying maybe, because we don't read of Daniel and his friends having families and wives and children, that they might be. We read of Daniel in the book of Daniel that he grows old by himself, alone, which is very unusual for a Hebrew person. And so I just want to draw your attention that in the Hebrew language, this particular word carries both meanings: a eunuch, one who is castrated, or officer, one who is very high ranking and in command and in charge or entrusted within the palace of the king of Babylon. We now read the last verse in Isaiah chapter 39. It says, "And then Hezekiah said to Isaiah, the word of Jehovah which you have spoken is good." And in his mind, he was thinking this, for he thought. Now, this word in verse 8, he thought, actually, he was saying to himself, "For there will be peace and truth in my days." And what does that mean? It means this: for in his days there will be shalom and there will be emet, trustworthiness. Basically, when Hezekiah reads of things like this, in his mind, it means this: in this 15 years that God has given him, or his natural course of life, he will not see the decay of the kingdom, number one. It will be somebody else's problem. That there will be peace and trustworthiness. There will be peace and truth in his days, and that his reign will be very good. And so, in Hezekiah's mind, he sees it as good. So, please remember, good and evil is always seen in the eyes of the beholder. And so, in the eyes of Hezekiah, all the troubles that Isaiah is predicting or prophesying is not going to happen in his day. And in his mind, that is good. Verse 13, Hezekiah listened to them, showed them all the treasure house, silver, gold, balsam oil, scented oil, which is olive oil, the house of armor, everything that was found in his treasuries, nothing in his house or in his realm that he controls, that he owns, that Hezekiah did not show them. Then Isaiah the prophet came to Hezekiah and said to him, "What did these men say, and from where have they come to you?" And Hezekiah said, "They have come from a far country, from Babylon." Verse 15, Isaiah said, "What have they seen in your house?" So Hezekiah answered, "They have seen everything that is in my house. There is nothing among my treasuries that I have not shown them." Then Isaiah said to Hezekiah, "Hear the word of God. This is a prophecy. Behold, the days are coming when everything that is in your house and what your fathers have stored up this day will be carried to Babylon. Nothing will be left, says the Lord. And some of your sons who will come from you, whom you will father, will be taken away, and they will become eunuchs or officials in the palace of the king of Babylon." So, interestingly, in the book of Isaiah, this English translation translates as eunuch, and in Second Kings, exactly the same word is translated officials. Verse 19, and then Hezekiah said to Isaiah, "The word of the Lord which you have spoken is good. In his eyes, in Hezekiah's eyes, is good. For he thought, is it not good if there will be peace?" And in this case, we have another word that's introduced here, and it is introduced in verse 19 um, as security. Very, very strangely, the English word is security, but it is emet, which means trustworthiness. And so we can see that words like officials translate as eunuch in Isaiah, words like security, uh, which is truthfulness. All of these are same words, identical in its expression, but English translations will differ. So it's sometimes a bit difficult to understand what is the original word that was said when we study the English translation. We now come to the final two verses, verse 20. Verse 20 says, "And the rest of the acts or the works or the things that Hezekiah did, and all his might, all his power." It's interesting that we need to understand uh, the idea that we have here is the is we mentioned about his power and his might. In the other kings, they don't talk much about that. It's only the acts. His might means he has shown his power and the things that he did. It says here, uh, and then, this is the word, and then, how he constructed the pool and the conduit. Now, this word conduit literally means a channel, a water channel. and brought water into the city. Now, this we need to understand it was done in the days of the attack, prior to the attack by Sennacherib. Prior. The reason being is this: they know that Sennacherib will come and he will surround the city, he will put it on siege. And so, what he did was he closed up the Gihon Spring. And that is located a little outside the foothills of Jerusalem. He then diverted via new channels. Why? Because the old channels, if you recall, in 2 Samuel and in chapter 5, David had actually conquered Jerusalem, the Jezebite stronghold, by crawling into one of these old channels. And Hezekiah decided to construct new channels to bring water into the city so that none of the Assyrians can follow the way that David had instructed to conquer. And so he shut out the old channels. Now, we call these the Hezekiah tunnels today when you go to visit the city of David. And the Gihon Spring is still flowing in the tunnel, in the channel. And there is a pool. And that pool is a Siloak pool. And that is what a trip to Jerusalem may show you. Are they not written in the book of Chronicles of the Kings of Judah, the book of Chronicles? In verse 21, and then after everything said and done, Hezekiah lied down with his fathers, went to sleep with his fathers. So this word lie down is to lie down to sleep in this context. Say, lay down to sleep with his fathers. And then we read this, and then his son Manasseh became king in his place. And with this, we come to the end of 2 Kings chapter 20.